Welcome to Her Incredible Mind, where we are highlighting some of the most successful women in science, technology, engineering, and math. These women are inspirational leaders, showing resilience in the face of adversity. By sharing these success stories, we hope to gain insight, inspire, and help guide those who are struggling on their journey within this industry. Hopefully, their stories will inspire you or someone you know to pursue a career in STEAM. Today, we're meeting with Lisa Lamoureux, who is a good friend of mine, and we're going to talk about Lisa's journey in her role and in her career as a veteran. So, welcome, Lisa, and thank you for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Can you describe your role today?
So I'm in the education field. So basically I'm a speech language pathologist and working in a public elementary school where I help students make progress who might have weaknesses with their articulation. So how they say their words, language problems, or social skills.
That's neat. How did you decide on that role today? Can you tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are?
Sure. So I've been in this role about 7 years. I started in my mid-30s to be my career with as a speech language pathologist, or SLP as we like to say. I was working on the East Coast. My husband and I made a trip or a vacation out here to Southern California, and we fell in love with it. And we made the major decision as adults or older adults that we wanted to move. And so our kids were in a position where they could start living their own life experience. So, I did have some guilt doing it, but we made the major move and landed here during the middle of COVID, which was, its own problems. But I worked for a little bit, just working as a contractor in the homes, working with kids who are under 3 and working with their families. And then I realized that I really missed the school setting.
Right.
So as soon as we had the vaccinations in place, I started applying, and that's how I'm in this role now. I've only actually been in it for about 3 months, so I'm still learning a lot, but I think my moves from Massachusetts to New Hampshire to California have made me kind of like, I adapt very quickly.
Right. That's great. What's nice about that is I love that you were doing it in the homes too as well, and kind of getting your feet wet, not jumping right into this full-time role. A lot of women, we see them, it becomes overwhelming sometimes, just in general for everyone, right? When you go right into the career change. So it's neat to see that you started with really kind of an intro, if you will, right? And then you went and took the full-time role.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I was fortunate to be able to do that. It's expensive out here, but we were fortunate.
It's very expensive in California. I remember being out there this last summer, and I can understand how you feel. And in the week that I was there, I still can understand how you feel. Now, when you think about kind of the longer journey, I mean, one of the things that I remember going working with John, your husband, and working through things. And we had gone to London, and that was really where you guys were stationed in the UK when you were in the Air Force.
Yes. So I was enrolled full-time in a college, business college, and didn't really know what I wanted to do when I grew up. I was 18. I hadn't really experienced much. It sounds vain, but I knew what I wanted to look like, I guess, which is very vain, but very, apropos for an 18-year-old, right?
Absolutely.
So I at one point, I just felt that this college wasn't for me, and I withdrew, and I kind of dabbled in some part-time jobs for a bit. I knew I eventually wanted to go back to school, but I didn't know exactly where or doing what. So my dad actually introduced me to, let's go to, a recruiter, and they have tests that you can take and you can find out what you're good in. It's electrical, mechanical, general kind of like skills, and then more advanced. And, based on your scores, they pick a career field for you. Well, I ended up passing all the scores. So I could have chose anything, but I ended up being a language analyst. So I was working in the Air Force with linguists and Morse operators, which was my husband's job way back when. And we just were doing a lot of classified work in classified facilities. So it's classified, and I've been sworn not to be able to talk about it.
Exactly. It's interesting. How long were you in the service for, Lisa?
6 years.
6
So
years.
it was wonderful experience. It helped me to kind of find my footing in the world. So it gave me some structure, a lot more than college did. Gave me some skills. I had to learn to take care of myself, do certain things. I had rules to follow though. And I think it helped me grow as a young girl.
Yeah, what's interesting about it is I think that you brought up two things that I've always had an impression of being in the service, and I've never been in the service, but my husband was in the United States Air Force too. And the thing I get from it is that one is an opportunity to really grow up, to really kind of, there are people that need that, that kind of push to be on your own. And as parents, I think I probably would aid in that, not knowing that I was aiding and not, allowing my child to grow and not being overprotective as a mom. I think I can be that way. But I think that, the service kind of forces people to be, independent and be responsible. But I also think that the attraction with the tuition and really being able to go to school is extremely beneficial for young girls in situations where you financially you just cannot do it. So I think that's something with the service that's been really attractive to a lot of people.
Absolutely. And with their promotion system, it's based on really merit. So you go along and you can advance just as well as men could in theory.
Right.
There are some setbacks as being a woman, or there was when I was there. I'm not sure now, but
right.
In theory, you have the same opportunities as a man, which is wonderful.
That's great. That really is great, and it's nice to hear. So when you're thinking about a role in your career, what is it is there that really attracts you to the role? What are you looking for in a role?
My current role?
Yes.
So I think as I lived my life's journey, or up to the point, I really developed who I was. I found out what my strengths were, what my weaknesses were. And it was a series of events in my life. Having children was one of them. The death of my father was one of them. So these were all steps that kind of changed my life and changed the role that I was looking toward. And I think it really helped me to find out what I really wanted to do. I tease people or joke about that I didn't really find out what I wanted to be when I grew up until I was about my mid-30s. So I was well grown before I figured it out.
Same.
And I think, a lot of women might feel bad about that. I don't know if men do, but I'm really happy with the experience that I had, and I wouldn't change anything about it. It helped me to find out that I'm a very compassionate and caring individual. I empathize a lot, and I've always been very academically driven. I've always loved learning, so I consider myself a lifelong learner. So being able to help students develop and nourish that love of learning that I have kind of plopped me into this role and guided me into this. And I didn't know anybody who was a speech language pathologist. I didn't have any affiliations with people who had been to a speech language pathologist, and it just somehow found me. I was working at a special education school, and I worked with a lot of nonverbal students, and not being able to express yourself was it really affected me, that the frustration they would have, and that's kind of how I made the decision. This is what I wanted to do.
It's nice to see that kind of evolution, and I feel the same way, that sometimes you have to something just comes to you, and it's okay. One of the things is that I think we all sometimes go down a career path because we feel like that was kind of the way we should have gone, and then you find something that kind of detours you, and it ends up being the best thing that has happened to you. And I think that that's something you have to be accepting of. I think that you have to think do I really want to do this? And if it really feels right, I mean, you definitely have the confidence to say, this is what it feels like. This is what I want to do,
Absolutely.
which is great, and young girls definitely need that kind of permission, if you will, to be
Absolutely.
able to change those dreams.
Mhm. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And find yourself along the way, I think that I don't, when I was growing up, I really didn't have a lot of guidance as to what I wanted to do. I knew what the jobs were and they entailed, but I didn't really know myself. And I think just finding out who I was internally and mentally was the factor that I needed to kind of go down my career path.
Absolutely. And, speaking of that, it tends to help us through those obstacles in our career as we, define ourselves. We're going through and we're actually looking at what obstacles are we, do we have in front of us, and what do we want to do?
Mhm.
So when we think about that, what do you think about the obstacles that you've had in your career? What do you think that they were?
So I think going back to school in my 30s was definitely an obstacle.
Mhm.
I was in going back for my a bachelor's, and I was going to class with a lot of 18, 19, 22-year-olds, and I was 10 years older than them. I definitely had my share of those colleague, peers, students that would shy away from me because of my age, whether they thought, I would try to mother them or whatever. But I found my niche, and I think I had a better appreciation of education. One, because I was paying for it myself, and two, I really knew what I wanted to do. So I knew this was important to me. So I took it maybe a little bit more seriously. So that was one of the obstacles. Moving around has been another obstacle. But I really found that it has helped me learn to adapt and quickly. So I've been able to adapt to new schools, new cultures, new communities in a manner that's 3 months. I feel like I've been there for like 9 months already.
Right.
So I feel very comfortable in my role right now. And I think that's because I did have several different schools that I worked with in between.
So now, do you also have to deal with regulations? Like, are the regulations different in California than they were, say, in New Hampshire or Massachusetts in the East Coast?
Yeah, well, because schools are all state run, there's a lot of changes and there's a lot of differences. So I've had to learn those along the way. And it's, now that I've been immersed in it, it's a lot easier to understand. But it still amazes me how different schools can be. Here we are training the future Americans, future US citizens, and the education is so different depending on where you live. And I think that's unfortunate. I wish it was a little bit more unified, because I think that it would be helpful for those kids. I've worked in a couple of smaller districts which didn't have as much of a budget, and then now I'm working for a larger district that has a bigger budget, and I see the differences. So that discrepancy is it's interesting, and I've been able to experience it. I always knew it was there, but now I've seen it.
Yeah, it's definitely something I think the long term, it's something everybody wants to really have, the best education system that we can for everyone, never mind,
Right.
where you are in the country. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Completely agree.
So,
So when you think about your journey, and I mean, you've had a fascinating journey, obviously, and then looking back at it, what advice would you give to young girls?
so I think my biggest piece of advice would be it's okay to change. As you get going and as you move through life, you really get to learn your strengths and your weaknesses, and that is the biggest part. And weaknesses are okay. Contrary to what we see on social media, people are not perfect. We all have, weaknesses. And learning how to deal with those weaknesses, I think, shows more of who you are as a person than anything. And so learning to identify those weaknesses, learning to identify your strengths, learning how to compensate for your weaknesses, and then knowing that it's okay to change. It's okay to change your mind. I felt originally that I was the only one that, didn't know really what I wanted to be. And just telling girls that it's okay to change. And there might be pauses in your career. You might decide to stay home and have children, and that's okay too. So just breathe, relax, and be happy with your choices. Sometimes things don't go our way, but that's how we learn and that's how we develop as a person and a human being.
That's absolutely great advice, seriously. So if you were thinking about kind of your career and where you've been, what advice would you give yourself, your younger self?
So to not worry as much, to nurture your own well-being. That's so important in order to do a good job. And honestly, Kate, I think it's something that I struggled with until probably these last 5 years. And I would have liked to have been able to enjoy, not be so worried and not be so concerned about those kind of things, and just on those times that you feel like you're not going to make it, realize that you are going to make it because you persist and you persevere. So that's what I would have told myself. I think just having that confidence of knowing that I was going to be okay. Yeah, but it's all going to be okay.
It is critical. It is critical. Absolutely. I completely agree. So if you had to sum your LinkedIn profile up to 3 words, what would you choose?
If I had a LinkedIn profile, and I may get one because of this, right?
Yes, right.
I'm kind of on that edge of social media and whether it's actually good for society. So, but I would call myself, so I'd say determined, passionate, and caring. And it's okay to use female terms when you're describing yourself because that's who you are. You don't have to say bossy and commanding.
Yeah, exactly.
I am those things, but just when I want to be. So
Good. That's good. You still need to be that, right? You still
right.
need to be true to yourself, and I think that's exactly what you are. And I appreciate that. And I do get your past 5 years. I feel them too. I know exactly what you mean by that, with the growth that happens in that time frame. So
Yeah.
Thanks for being with us, Lisa. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
We thank you for your service, and we thank you for this interview. It's been very insightful. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Thank you.